America's birthday is right around the corner, so in honor of the 4th of July, we're doing a deep dive into America's messed up, quasi-historical, almost folklore. Today, we get to talk about Uncle Sam, the man who personifies the United States of America, its patriotic fervor, and its federal government. Uncle Sam is the bearded fella who dons the most American drip you've ever seen. And if you catch him pointing at you, saying he wants you to do something for the good of our country, you damn well better do it. Like joining the US Army during World War II. This poster is the most famous military recruitment ad in US history. Uncle Sam pointed, and millions of young Americans signed up to risk their lives fighting the forces of evil on the beaches of Normandy and beyond. That's a pretty powerful point. Maybe I should try that. I want you to like and subscribe. Did that work, or does it not work without the hat? Let me try again. I want you to follow your dreams, and today's sponsor, Squarespace, can help you like no other. Because having your own website is crucial to running your own business, marketing yourself, or sharing your passion with the world. They've taken the intimidating task of building a website and put it on easy mode so anyone can do it regardless of past experience with their new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint. At the very start, you could choose from professionally curated layouts and styling options. Then you can fully customize it however you see fit with Squarespace's revolutionary drag-and-drop technology to build a unique online presence from the ground up. Easily list homemade goods for sale online and bless your customers with a seamless experience by accepting credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and in eligible countries even offer the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. So if you want to join me in taking your small business, side hustle, or passion project to the next level, go to squarespace.com/JohnSolo to start a completely free trial. And when your site is ready for launch, use code JohnSolo to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So we don't really know when the idea of Uncle Sam first came to be, but he wasn't mentioned in any resources from the 1700s, when the United States became independent. You see, European countries have a grand tradition of using romantic, classical female figures as national personifications. You've got Britannia for Britain, Italia Turrita for Italy, and Marion for France. And when European countries were colonizing North and South America, they continued this trend by creating illustrated personifications of the Americas that resembled Native Americans surrounded by exotic American wildlife. But around the time of the American Revolution in the 1770s, a new white female personification began to appear for the United States specifically. She was called Columbia, or Miss Columbia. Columbia gets her first mention in a Phyllis Wheatley poem from 1775. Here are a few snippets. Celestial choir, enthroned in realms of light, Columbia's scenes of glorious toils I write. While freedoms cause her anxious breast alarms, she flashes dreadful in refulgent arms. 1 century scarce performed its destined round, when Gallic powers Columbia's fury found. And so may you, whoever dares disgrace the land of freedom's heaven-defended race. Despite Phyllis Wheatley being a black woman, Columbia went on to be visualized as an idealized white woman, which, if you follow American history, you'll know is not uncommon. Columbia was kind of a romantic, neoclassical personification of the new American nation that wanted to see itself as equal with Europe. In the 1800s, she showed up in a lot of iconic American illustrations and cartoons. Then she kind of got twirled up with Lady Liberty when the French dropped that big-ass statue in New York Harbor. And now you may know her as the mascot and namesake for Columbia Pictures, who were nice enough to give her a pet flying horse. This is where things get really interesting though, because Columbia wasn't the only one of her kind. And I'm not talking about the previously mentioned personifications of other countries like Italy and France. No, at the start of the Revolutionary War, Columbia was given a brother, and most Americans today have never even heard his name. He was known as Brother Jonathan, and his name may come from a nickname used for Puritan Roundheads, people who supported the British Parliament during the English Civil War. These same Puritans went on to found most of the New England colonies, and their descendants, who became known as Yankees, continued to use the Brother Jonathan personification, though he evolved along with them. Brother Jonathan was supposed to be a sort of emblematic Yankee character. He's kind of dignified and wears formal clothes, but they're often simple, out of fashion, and don't fit quite right. To put it another way, he's a Yankee Doodle dandy. a term I'll be breaking down the messed up origins of next week, so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. But if you're living in the future and next week has already passed, go ahead and watch it. I'm sure it turned out pretty great. So the United States in the early 1800s had no shortage of personifications, but I would argue their names could use some work. If you look at their initials, you've got Columbia, which starts with a C, boring. Brother Jonathan is BJ, and that's just not gonna work. But then we've got Uncle Sam, who shares the very same initials as our country, US. Eh? As far as we know, the term Uncle Sam began circulating through the US military sometime before 1810. The reason we know this is because of a diary entry from Isaac Mayo, who was a midshipman in the Navy. In the midst of complaining about being deadly seasick and expressing his desire to abandon ship, he wrote, "Oh, could I have got ashore in the height of it. I swear that Uncle Sam, as they call him, would certainly forever have lost the services of at least one sailor." At this point, Uncle Sam seemed to refer to the US military, or maybe the federal government, but he definitely wasn't a real person or character yet. But that all changed during the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was basically a sequel to the previous War of Independence, where the new American nation battled against their old enemy, Great Britain. This time, the war was sparked by naval restrictions. British ships were blocking American ships from trading with other European countries, and sometimes actually stealing their sailors. Canada was still British territory at this point, and in 1812, the US decided to kick off a new war by invading our neighbors to the north. One major difference between the conflicts, though, is that the Revolutionary War was fought by individual colonies and militias uniting for a common cause, while the War of 1812 was the United States of America's first official war that they fought with their own federal armed forces, who evidently could have benefited from more training and strategy, since at one point the British managed to burn down the White House. It was their first war, okay? They didn't even have drones yet. Oh shit. Like any war, the War of 1812 generated some legends, some characters, and one future genocidal politician. One of these legends was the first person to be identified with Uncle Sam, a meat packer up in Troy, New York. And that's not a euphemism. His name was Samuel Wilson, and he fought on Team America during the Revolutionary War. But by 1812, he and his brother Ebenezer were running a pretty profitable pork and beef business in Troy. Sidebar, this is the first time I've ever come across a real person whose name was Ebenezer. Up until now, I would have absolutely believed that Charles Dickens just made that name up for Scrooge. But evidently not. When the War of 1812 kicked off, the Wilson brothers secured a contract to supply the U.S. Army in New York and New Jersey with 2,000 barrels of pork and 3,000 barrels of beef for 1 year. This contract also gave Samuel Wilson the responsibility of being the U.S. Army's meat inspector. And again, that's not a euphemism. In addition to supplying and delivering the barrels of meat, it was his job to verify freshness, quality of packaging, etc. Supposedly, when one of these extremely appetizing meat barrels was approved by Sam Wilson, he stamped it US, meaning it was good to go for the US Army. And because much of the War of 1812 was fought in upstate New York, it meant a lot of meat didn't go far from Troy, so the troops actually knew Sam Wilson. And so an association, or maybe a joke, grew that the US letters on those zesty, delicious, mouth-watering meat barrels stood for Uncle Sam, meaning Samuel Wilson. Disclaimer, this story is probably at least a little bit bullshit, but it is the earliest instance we know of where Uncle Sam refers to a person and not just an idea. Specifically, an industrious person who might not fight for America, but still works hard for the war effort. That theme would stick around for centuries to come, and during that time, the concept of Uncle Sam as a personification, with like legs and arms and stuff, evolved. In the first half of the 1800s, Uncle Sam's illustrated depictions kinda evolved from Brother Jonathan's. He took on Brother Jonathan's ratty formal wear and would appear occasionally in political cartoons representing America. Then, in 1872, Uncle Sam really solidified when the cartoonist Thomas Nast took a liking to him. In the middle of the 1800s, before and after the US Civil War, Thomas Nast was the most famous political cartoonist in the country. The man is actually considered the father of of the American cartoon, which is ironic since he was born in Germany. His cartoons were extremely critical of corrupt political machines like Tammany Hall in New York City. And during the 1870s, his political cartoons got so much heat that he actually had to move his family for their safety. Over his career, Nast's cartoons generally showed support for American Indians and Chinese Americans. His illustrations also played a pivotal role in shaping our modern idea of Santa Claus, which we talked about in my episode on the messed up origins of Santa. Link is on screen for those who want to learn more about that. But not all of Nast's accomplishments were so admirable. Like most of the historical figures we discuss, he had a dark side. Some of his beliefs put him at odds with immigrants moving to the Northeast, who were largely Catholic, and he especially singled out Irish immigrants as a threat to American democracy and drew them as drunken, thuggish apes. And curiously, after slavery did end, Nast gave African Americans the same treatment as the Irish, depicting them with ape-like features. Pretty messed up. Thomas Nast's Uncle Sam was given the opposite treatment though. He first appeared in a Nast cartoon in 1872, and he was a dignified, skinny, tall, Protestant white American, because that was the sort of person that white Protestant Americans tended to like. Unlike Brother Jonathan, Uncle Sam was no dandy either. His clothes had evolved from Brother Jonathan's to directly incorporate the stars and stripes from the US flag, and he didn't look anything like Samuel Wilson. His facial hair and hat and whole vibe actually resembled Abraham Lincoln, likely because Nast was a big Lincoln fan, and Lincoln had been killed only 8 years prior. The Thomas Nast cartoons may have influenced Uncle Sam's modern look, but chances are that when I say Uncle Sam, this recruitment poster from 1917 is what pops into your mind, where he wants you for the US Army. With more than 4 million copies of this image printed between 1917 and 1918, the last 2 years of World War I, it was pretty much guaranteed that this would become the definitive Uncle Sam for all Americans going forward. So who's responsible for this masterpiece? A guy named James Montgomery Flagg, who at his peak was the highest paid illustrator in the US. But this wasn't his most original work. Flagg based Uncle Sam's face off his own, because using your own reflection as a reference is a lot cheaper than hiring a model, and the poster was a rip-off of a similar 1914 poster from the UK, showing Britain's Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, and his fantastic mustache. He did create plenty of other recruitment posters though, and while they may not be as iconic, they're still pretty interesting to look at. Here, we've got our girl Columbia calling on American men to join the Navy, and another where she encourages Americans to grow their own gardens so they don't have to rely on the same food supply as the military and take away valuable rations from our fighting forces. Flagg was far from the only artist to create posters like these, but he was one of the few to receive public credit for his work. For example, here's one that's simply credited to the United States Fuel Administration, where Uncle Sam needs that extra shovelful and encourages Americans to burn less of their coal to make heat, and to never skip arm day so they can get some rippin' triceps. He also needed our boys and girls to save their quarters and buy war-saving stamps. Uncle Sam posters were apparently so successful in World War I that they were revived for World War II. Also in World War II, Uncle Sam got an upgrade from single-frame posters and cartoons to his very own comic run. In National Comics #1, created by the famous cartoonist Will Eisner and published by Quality Comics, Uncle Sam was a mystical being who was originally a slain Revolutionary War soldier who now appeared whenever his country needed him. You know, to punch Nazis and stuff. Then in the 50s, DC Comics bought Quality Comics, which led to Uncle Sam the superhero appearing in 70s Justice League comics and some others. National personifications have an interesting dichotomy. On the one hand, a national personification can be something that everyone in a country believes in, identifies with, and aspires to. A national personification can inspire people to come together and be more than just individuals. This guy points and people listen, because he's not just a guy, he's a whole country. And if one looks long enough into his powerful stare, you're reminded of America's whole mythic history, both the good and the bad, and that can certainly inspire you to take action. He has a lot of power. Some might say too much power. It's important to remember that when national symbols and identities are wielded by the wrong people for the wrong reasons, a lot of pain and destruction could come along with it. And really, this applies to any media that calls on you to take action, including myself. So I implore you to always reflect on these messages to make sure you agree with them before you accept them. Fortunately, there's not a lot of harm in me saying I want you to like and subscribe, so go ahead and do that for more episodes on messed up history. Then comment your thoughts on Uncle Sam and all the history we discussed today, because I love reading through your feedback. You guys always manage to teach me something. I know you wanted to get in my lap just to sleep, but when you sleep, no one could see your handsome face. And that's just a travesty. I'll see you all again next week when I dive into the messed up origins of Yankee Doodle Dandy. Until then, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first. Would you look at that? I kinda got a PowerPoint of my own.